हरे कृष्ण। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा. So we welcome you all to this new course that we are starting today. So the course is titled Self-Evaluation Tools on the Path of Bhakti. So as you might know that we all have a desire to understand, any sincere sadhaka for that matter, he has a desire to understand whether he is making tangible progress on the path of his practice or not. I mean, whether it is a Buddhist practicing his path or a Vaishnava practicing his path, whomever it may be, if he is sincere, then naturally he would like to know whether he is progressing on the path or not. So one should understand that the path that has been chalked out by our acharyas is not a vague path. It is a science. Bhakti has been presented as a science by stalwart acharyas of our parampara like Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Srila Jiva Goswami, Srila Sanatan Goswami, and all the subsequent acharyas including Srila Prabhupada and his current followers. They have presented bhakti as a science, a verifiable science, and that's exactly what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita also. Raja Vidya Rajaguhyam Pavitram Midamuttamam Pratyakshaavagamam Dharmyam Susukam Kartumavyam. He calls bhakti as Pratyakshaavagamam, that which can be practically experienced. Just that we need to know what we can reasonably expect to experience at what stage of our devotional service. Once we know that, then we won't panic if we are progressing or not. This reminds me of an experience that His Grace Radha Gopinath Prabhu, one of the senior most brahmacharis from Chowpatty temple, he shared one time that once when he was in college, they had gone for a picnic. So in this picnic, they were going to go to a particular water body, maybe it was a river or it was a lake, I don't recollect. So, but that for taking bath and swimming. So everyone was so enthusiastic, they were running towards the river. But one person was trying to, one villager, local villager, he was trying to warn them, carry some salt with you, because there are many leeches in this river. It can get stuck to your body and it will suck your blood. So if you put some salt, sprinkle some salt on it, it will let you go. Otherwise you cannot physically separate a leech from your body. So, but everyone was so eager to go and jump into the water, but that no one bothered to listen to this old villager. Incidentally, only Radha Gopinath Prabhu happened to hear this warning. So he did carry some salt with him. So they all jumped into the water, and within a few minutes people started screaming. And it's, you know, and it was like shocking cries, because they were trying to peel off the leeches and the leeches would not come. And they could clearly see the leeches growing in size because they were sucking the blood from their own body. So everyone was panicking except Radha Gopinath Prabhu. Not, in fact, there were 4 or 5 leeches sticking to his own body. It's not that he was not attacked by the leeches. Leeches were attacking his body also. But then he actually knew that if he would sprinkle some salt, it would go away. So similarly, in spiritual life, when we are attacked by various anarthas, which like Mother Ganges is relentless. Day in and day out we have been practicing for years, but the anarthas wouldn't go. Or maybe we think that we are not experiencing taste in the holy name. And all these doubts come, is the process really working? So, so in this case, in this story, Radha Gopinath Prabhu calmly walked out, picked up some salt, sprinkled it on the leeches and they came away. And then he called every one of them and then he did the same to all of them. So in this way, when he clearly understood, okay, this is the obstacle, and if I patiently go and do this particular activity, that obstacle will be removed. So in our practice also, when we know that, if this is the particular obstacle, then at what stage of my practice can I reasonably expect this obstacle to go away? What stage of practice I am in right now, and what do I need to do to go from this stage of practice to the next stage? How do we cross this seemingly unpassable stage of anartha nivritti? So is anartha nivritti one stage, or are there sub stages within the stage of anartha nivritti? Because if you say that you enroll in our school and then 25 years later we will give you the PhD certificate. In between nothing. So if you survive till 25 years you will get the certificate. Then no one would be inspired to join that school. People need naturally time and again reminders or certificates indicating, okay, you are doing well, you have crossed this stage, you have crossed this stage now. So, just like a running commentary, people are not just satisfied to know that India won the cricket match. They want to know live commentary of how it is going, how the match is progressing. That curiosity is there. So if this curiosity is present about a simple cricket match with which 22 players not at all related to you are playing, then isn't it natural for a sincerely practicing sadhaka to know how his own spiritual life is panning out? So therefore, this is a natural inquiry any sadhaka would have, and our acharyas are very much aware of this genuine curiosity of a sincere sadhaka, and they have written books. So the book that we will be primarily referring to, of course we will refer from other books also, but the primary reference book for this course, we are going to discuss part 1 of this course. This will be from the book Madhurya Kadambini by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So, in this course, this is a course, so it requires some element of commitment, because at the end of this course you will have something tangible to take home. Some very tangible tools for improving our own practice, some tangible tools for evaluating our own current status of bhakti, some tangible tools for understanding the road ahead, what is the road that lies ahead. So these are the various things that we will be getting at the end of this course. So I have a few requests from you. One is, as far as possible, try to attend the whole course. If it is not possible, if you miss out a particular session, you can always log into the website and you can hear the recording that would be posted there, so that you are ready for the next course. But there is one disadvantage with that, because if you hear the recording, then you cannot post your questions on that particular class. But if you are hearing it live, then you have the opportunity to immediately type relevant questions. Of course, I will not be answering those questions live, but the next day, before starting that particular day's portion, I will answer all the questions that were asked on that particular day's session. So please, this is a free course, but free in terms of monetary commitment, but in terms of sincerity, sincere attendance, if possible, you can try to take some notes either on your smartphone, or if you are an old timer, you can take a paper and pen or a notebook and pen, jot down the notes, jot down the questions, immediately type those questions in the chat box, and you can expect those questions to be addressed the next day. So this is a small request, so that the time you spend sitting in front of your smartphone or your laptop watching this lecture can be fruitful. It can help in elevating your spiritual practice at least little bit, because that's the way in which the book has been written. So one more small point about this book, Madhurya Kadambini. The word Madhurya Kadambini, Madhurya means nectar or sweet, something which is very sweet. Kadambini means cloud bank. So the cloud bank that we know, it carries water so that it can shower in the form of rain. But the cloud bank that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is presenting here, it possesses not water but pure unalloyed nectar. So he has divided the chapter into nectar showers. He calls it first shower of nectar, second shower of nectar, Pratama Amrita Vrishti, Dvitiya Amrita Vrishti, Tritiya Amrita Vrishti, like that. So he has divided the chapters in the form of Amrita Vrishti, means shower of nectar. So this book was written based on two very landmark verses written by Srila Rupa Goswami in his book Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. You all might know these two verses, which describes the 9 stages of bhakti. Adau Shraddha, Tata Sadhu Sangha, Atha Bhajana Kriyo, Atha Nartana Vritti Syat, and so on. How it starts from Shraddha to Sadhu Sangha to Bhajana Kriya to Anartana Vritti to Nishta to Ruchi to Asakti to Prema. How one progresses in this path of devotional service is described in these two verses, and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has taken these two verses and elaborated, and such a kind of elaboration is not given by even Srila Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He just mentions these stages, but what these stages actually are is actually described by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in this book Madhurya Kadambini. In fact, he goes even before Shraddha. What happens before Shraddha? And he describes what happens after Prema. So it is a very elaborate discussion. These two verses are, you can say like, this book is a purport of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur to these two verses. It's a small book, but very crisp and clear in its description of these stages of bhakti. So we will start from even the stage before we attain Shraddha. So that's what we will be seeing starting from today. So we will start. So this book, so we will start with the first chapter, which is titled as Pratama Amrita Vrishti, the first shower of nectar. And in this first chapter, he will be discussing about the super excellence of bhakti, how bhakti as a path is super excellent compared to the other paths of karma, jnana, yoga, etc. So that is what will be described in this first chapter. And the second chapter will speak about mainly bhajana kriya, shraddha, sadhu sangha and bhajana kriya. And within bhajana kriya it will describe anishtita bhajana kriya. Anishtita bhajana kriya means unsteady devotional service. So before our practice of bhakti becomes steady, it is unsteady for a while. Actually, it remains unsteady for a long while. And what happens during that stage of unsteady devotional service is very brilliantly described by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in this book. And then in the third shower, we will discuss the very important concept of anartha nivritti. So during this anishtita bhajana kriya, how gradually by practice of devotional service, the various unwanted desires that we have in our heart in the form of lust, anger, envy, greed, illusion, pride, and many of its sub branches, how it is gradually destroyed, we will be seeing. And then in the fourth chapter, we will discuss the theme of Nishtha or steady devotional service. And then in the fifth chapter, we will discuss about Ruchi, where one develops tangible taste for practice of devotional service. And then the sixth chapter will be about Asakti, where the person develops a very strong attraction to Krishna. And the seventh shower talks about Bhava Bhakti, and in the eighth shower we will speak about the grand finale, how the final success of the sadhaka when he reaches the stage of prema and establishes an unbreakable, loving, affectionate relationship with Krishna in one of the five rasas, Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya and Madhurya. So this is a brief overview of this whole book. So now we will start with the first chapter, which is going to speak about the super excellence of bhakti. So there are many themes that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur will cover in this chapter, very interesting chapter. So first he starts in the standard way of offering Mangalacharan. Mangalacharan means invoking auspiciousness. So he first offers, in the first verse of Mangalacharan, he explains the title of the book. Why is this book called Madhurya Kadambini, Cloud Bank of Nectar? And what is that nectar actually? So he compiles this beautiful verse. He says, Hridva pre nava bhakti shashya vitate sanjeevani swagama rambe kama tapartudaha damani vishwapaga ullasini दूरान में मरुशाकिनोपि सरसी भावाय भूयात प्रभो श्री चैतन्य कृपा निरंकुश महामाधुर्य कादंबिनी. So this verse ends with the words describing the title of this chapter, Madhurya Kadambini, like that. So he says, Prabhu Shri Chaitanya Kripa, may the mercy of Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or the mercy of Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nirankusha Mahamadhurya Kadambini. Nirankusha means uncontrollable. Ankush is like the elephant goad, which is used to control the elephant. But the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is compared to an uncontrollable Mahamadhurya Kadambini, a giant cloud bank of nectar. So the cloud bank of nectar is actually the compassion of Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then he says, what does this mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accomplish? How does it help the living entities of this world? He says in three ways. He says, Sanjeevani. Sanjeevani means it gives life. It gives life to Nava Bhakti Shashya Vitate, the grains of ninefold devotional service. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma Nivedanam. These 9 paths get their nourishment, primary nourishment from the mercy of Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who has invested all his powers in these 9 processes. This is the first benefit of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. Then second benefit, he says, Kama tapartu daha damani. So he's mentioned that the living entity, since time immemorial, since the time he decided to turn his face away from Krishna, Krishna buliya se jeev bhogavancha kare, nikatastha maya tare jhapatiya dare. So since the time he chose to turn his face away from Krishna, he has been scorched by the summer heat of lust, the desire to enjoy separately from Krishna. But when one comes in touch with the cooling showers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy, that scorching heat is completely subdued and the cooling shower of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy shines forth on that particular person. So this is the second benefit of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy, which is compared to an uncontrolled, huge cloud bank of mercy. The third benefit, he says is Vishwa Apaga Ullasini. Vishwa refers to this whole world, all the living entities living in this world, which are compared to Apaga. Apa is water, Ga means moving water, means a river. Vishwa Apaga Ullasini. Ullasini means it puts them into great happiness. So he is telling that whoever comes in touch with this cloud bank of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy, cloud bank of nectar, which is compared to a cloud bank of nectar, he becomes very happy. He becomes very auspicious. So in this way, the life of a sadhaka, one who takes up to this path of bhakti as chalked out by Srila Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, becomes very auspicious. We all have seen in our own lives. We have struggled with, each one of us has struggled with uncontrollable habits, bad habits, and slowly but surely the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has released us from those trappings, and it is still releases us from various other trappings which we are still struggling with. So our own life is an example that the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is working powerfully. And these are impressions, vasanas, samskaras which we have accumulated over millions and millions of lifetimes. And in one lifetime, if the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is successful enough to scrape off layers and layers of that conditioning, it is definitely working. So here in a very natural Vaishnava humility, Srila Vishnu Jagadakur is mentioning, Duran me marushaki nopi sarasi bhavaya bhuyat prabho. He says, from far off, I don't have the qualification to even come near that nectarian shower of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. But from a distance, if even one drop of that mercy falls on me, I'll become very fortunate. I am like a dried up tree in the middle of a desert. I am going to give up my life. But if one drop of that mercy falls on me, then I can grow luxuriously in my spiritual life. Like that, Srila Vishnu Jagadakur is presenting Dainya Bodhika. He is presenting his own fallen state out of a natural state of humility. And he is also glorifying the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the cloud bank of nectar. So this is the first verse that Srila Vishnu Jagadakur has compiled, glorifying the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as that cloud bank of nectar. In the next verse, he glorifies his own role model, his own that personality whose footsteps he is very closely trying to follow, which is Srila Rupa Goswami. He offers this beautiful verse glorifying Srila Rupa Goswami. Bhakti purvai shritas tam tu rasam pashyed yadattadi tam naumi satatam rupa nama priyajanam harehe. He says, Bhakti purvai shrita, There are many, many great devotees in the past who have taken shelter of the path of bhakti. They have practiced the path of bhakti, they have progressed on the path of bhakti, they have reached the pinnacle of the path of bhakti, experienced the transcendental emotions of reciprocation with Krishna, and eventually attained perfection. But none of them have written their experience of transcendental emotions in such a scientific way in which Srila Rupa Goswami has presented in books like Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, Ujjvala Neelamani, like that. So people, only after Rupa Goswami, a common devotee has received the eyes to see and maybe even attempt to understand transcendental emotions. It is only due to the mercy of Srila Rupa Goswami that even common devotees, they don't have to wait that excruciatingly long period till they reach prema to actually experience rasa, to actually understand rasa. Of course, it's not an excruciating time. Krishna mentions susukam kartum avyayam. It is a very pleasant path actually. Especially in the association of devotees, practice of devotional service is pleasant, it's very pleasant. But nevertheless, if we are not very clear about our own progress, that anxiety can be excruciating. So he says that rasam pashyed, even a common man has received the eyes to see, oh, this is what rasa would be, this is what would be the experience of experiencing a reciprocation with Krishna. So therefore he says, even though so many devotees have practiced the path of bhakti, they have achieved perfection, but only Rupa Goswami has given the eyes to a common devotee to see and understand those ecstatic emotions which are experienced by exalted devotees and make some sense out of it. So he says, while I offer my respects to all those previous devotees, my repeated respects only to Srila Rupa Goswami. I am extremely grateful to him, and the whole humanity has to be grateful to Srila Rupa Goswami for doing such an unprecedented work of presenting rasa in the form of science, spiritual rasa. Of course, material rasa has been very deeply analyzed and presented by Bharat Muni in his Natya Shastra. And interestingly, Srila Rupa Goswami also uses Bharat Muni's Natya Shastra as the template to write the rasa section of Srila Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu. So, with these two verses, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur invokes auspiciousness for all the readers and himself who are trying to understand this book, Shri Madhurya Kadambini. So now with that we will start with the first theme that is discussed in this book, which is what is the highest understanding of absolute truth? What is the highest understanding of absolute truth? Bhagavatam describes Vadanti tat tattvavidas tattvam yad jnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdyate. Bhagavatam describes 3 different stages of understanding the absolute truth, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came and expanded that understanding. So till Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, the understanding and appreciation of the absolute truth was Bhagavan. Shadaishwarya Purno Yaiha Bhagavan Sa Swayamayam. So that Shadaishwarya Purna Bhagavan, understanding the Supreme Lord to be the possessor of all the 6 opulences in full, that was the highest understanding. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came and emphasized a much more deep appreciation of the absolute truth. He came and gave an understanding of the absolute truth, the way in which the Supreme Lord likes to identify himself. And what is that? Understanding the absolute truth as Akhila Rasamrita Murti. So Akhila means complete, or Akhila also means, Khila means inferior, and Akhila means that which is in which there is no inferior part, in which there is no material part. So Akhila also refers to spiritual. So Akhila Rasa refers to spiritual rasa or spiritual emotions, spiritual mellows. And Amrita, what is the nature of that Akhila Rasa? It is very nectarian and it is eternal, Amrita. And Murti, Krishna is the personification of that Akhila Rasa, which is Amrita, nectarian. Akhila Rasa Amrita Murti. A description of the absolute truth as one who is perfectly capable of reciprocating with every single flavor of desire that the devotee may have, as every single craving that a devotee might have in terms of expectations of reciprocation. Sometimes, even in ordinary life, people have different needs of fulfillment. Sometimes they need the fulfillment of taking care of people. Sometimes they have a need for experiencing the fulfillment of being taken care of by someone. Sometimes they have a need for fulfillment in terms of friendships. They have a need for fulfillment in terms of submissively serving under someone. So in this way, in this material world, people have different kinds of needs which they hope to get fulfilled by different kinds of people. But in the nature of this material world is because there is an element of selfishness in everyone's dealings with each other. At some point or other, these endeavors to seek that fulfillment ends up in frustration. But with Krishna, as a single person, he can fulfill all those different needs. Sometimes you may have the need to vent out your anger on someone. Sometimes you may have the need to have a good combat, to have a good fight with someone. Viryaras. So, all these different rasas, these different mellows in the spiritual realm can be perfectly fulfilled by establishing a relationship with this one personality who is Krishna. So, Srila Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has redefined the highest understanding of the absolute truth by presenting this understanding of Krishna as Akhila Rasamrita Murti. It's not that the Vedic scriptures do not talk about this aspect of the absolute truth, but it is very rare and very hidden. Like for example, Sri Vishwanath Jagadakur himself quotes the Taittiriya Upanishad, which mentions Brahma Puchcham Pratishta, meaning that ultimately it is the Brahman which supports everything. So the highest understanding of the absolute truth is Brahman. So one may say, oh, this is the highest understanding of absolute truth. But the same Taittiriya Upanishad little later mentions Raso vai saha rasam hi evayam labdva anandi bhavati. It describes the absolute truth as rasa incarnate, as Akhila Rasamrita Murti. So, and this understanding is presented very beautifully in one of the famous verses from the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the chapter in which Krishna and Balramji fight with the wrestlers, Chanura, Mushtika, Shala, Toshala, Kuta and all these gigantic, humongous wrestlers. So while they are entering the wrestling arena, various people are seeing Krishna. The common man of Mathura is seeing Krishna. The ladies of Mathura, they are seeing Krishna. Krishna's own friends are seeing Krishna. The elderly Gopas and Gopis of Vraja who had come with Krishna, they were seeing Krishna. So in this way, and the inimical kings like Shishupal and others who were sitting in that arena, they were seeing Krishna. So many people were seeing Krishna. Kamsa was seeing Krishna. And each one was experiencing a particular emotion experienced at its peak. That peak emotion, but a particular emotion was experienced by everyone. So this is a famous verse. Mallanam ashanirnam naravaro strinam smaro murtiman gopanam swajano satam shitibujam shasta swapitro shishuhu mrityurbojapater virada vidusham tattvam param yoginam vrishninam paradevateti vidito rangam gatas sagrajah. So, rangam gatah sa agraja. When Krishna was entering into the wrestling arena of Kamsa along with his brother Balramji, it is mentioned that the wrestlers saw him as thunderbolt personified. This is Virya Rasa. So, and the men of the common men of Mathura, they saw him as the best amongst the males. So this is Vismaya Rasa or Adbhuta Rasa. They were like dumbstruck. Strinam Smaro Murtiman, the ladies of Mathura, they saw him as Cupid personified, Madhurya Ras. Gopanam Swajano, the Gopa friends of Krishna, they saw him as just one amongst them, their own playmate. So this has two rasas, Sakhyaras, friendship, and Hasyaras, jovial mood, jovial rasa. Asatam Kshitibujam Shasta, the impious rulers like Kamsa and Shishupal, they were seeing him as chastiser, Shasta, Raudraras, or anger. Swapitroho Shishuhu, the elderly Gopas like Nanda Maharaj, they were seeing Krishna as their own son, and they were deeply worried that these wrestlers of Kamsa who were looking like mountains were going to fight with tender-bodied Krishna and Balram. So it was giving them a lot of compassion also. So two rasas are indicated here, which is Vatsalya Rasa and Karuna Rasa, compassion. Mrityur Bhojapatir, Bhojapati Kamsa was seeing Krishna as death personified. This is Bhayanaka Rasa, ghastliness. And Virada Vidusham, Avidusham, the unintelligent people were seeing Krishna as the Virat Roop. So this is Bhibatsa Rasa or fearfulness. Tattvam Param Yoginam, the yogis were seeing him as the absolute truth. So this is Shanta Rasa. And Vrishninam Paradevateti Vidito, Rangam Gata Sagraja. So the Vrishnis are, they saw him as the supreme worshipable deity. So this is Dasyaras, like that. So in this way, the highest understanding of the absolute truth is described as Rasa incarnate or Akila Rasamrita Murti, Raso Vaisaha, as a personification of all spiritual rasas. And this is slightly indicated in Bhagavad Gita also, where Krishna says, Brahmano hi pratishta aham. Don't think that the Brahman is the source of everything. It is, but I am the source of that Brahman. Like that. So in this way, in this second theme after Mangalacharan, this book, Madhurya Kadambini, establishes the highest understanding of the absolute truth is actually Akila Rasamrita Murti, the personification of all spiritual rasas. Then we will now go to the third theme of this book, which is a very interesting theme. We will try to discuss this little elaborately. How does one receive bhakti? How Shuddha Bhakti is very independent and it is self-manifest. So how do we understand this subject matter? So this will be discussed in this next theme, and we will try to discuss it little more elaborately. So how does one receive the seed of devotion? So how does one receive the seed of devotion? So whenever the bhakti is described in Srimad Bhagavatam and other such literatures, three things are observed. The word ahaituki is used. Ahaituki apratihata yayatma suprasidati. So this is one observation. And the second thing is, whenever Bhagavatam talks about someone getting bhakti, the word yadrichaya is also used. Yadrichaya matkatadau jata shaddostu yah puman na nirvidno nati sakto bhakti yogosya siddhida, like that. Many such verses, we will see some of those verses now. So the word yadrichaya is used. And the common observation is that some people receive bhakti and some people do not receive bhakti. So when you have to explain how does one receive the seed of devotion, how does one receive bhakti, then you will have to account for these three things. How is bhakti ahaituki? How do you account for the word yadrichaya? And how will you explain that only some people take up to bhakti? In fact, it is only a very minuscule percentage of people in a country or in a nation or all over the world. Only a very minuscule percentage of people have accepted the path of bhakti. So how will you account for this? So if you try to explore these three subject matters, then it will give a very clear understanding of how one receives the seed of devotion. Okay, and what is that seed of devotion? And what are we trying to distribute? These are very, very critical subject matters which we need to understand. So first let's try to understand this word ahaituki. So if you see, there are many verses in Bhagavatam which uses this word ahaituki. Savai pumsam parodharmo yato bhaktir adokshaje ahaituki apratihata yayatma suprasidati. You see, here the word ahaituki is used, which means that how bhakti is not caused by anything other than itself. That is the way in which the word ahaituki is used. Another verse in the first canto. Atma ramascha munayo nirgranta api urukrame kurvanti ahaitukim bhaktim ittam bhuta guno hari. So this is Suta Goswami discussing about how even the completely self-satisfied Atma Ramas are attracted to bhakti. And while describing the nature of bhakti, he says ahaituki. Kurvanti ahaitukim bhaktim ittam bhuta guno hari, like that. This is the second verse which describes, which uses the word ahaituki to indicate bhakti. Another verse that you see is from the third canto, 29th chapter. This verse is given as a definition of pure devotional service. Madguna shruti matrena mayi sarva guhashaye manogati ravichinna yata gangamba sombudau lakshanam bhakti yogasya nirgunasya hi udahritam ahaituki avyavahita ya bhakti purushottame. Again the word ahaituki is indicated. Ahaituki avyavahita ya bhakti purushottame. Again the word ahaituki is used to indicate bhakti. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself in his Shikshashtakam says, Nadanam, Najanam, Na Sundarim Kavitam Va Jagadisha Kamaye, Mama Janmani Janmanishware Bhavatad Bhaktir Ahaituki Tvai, he says. So he is also asking for Ahaituki Bhakti. So therefore, we have to understand, and also so many other verses in Bhagavatam. This is another example that you see in the screen. This is from the 5th canto, prayers by Prahlad Maharaj to Narasimha Dev. Another very famous verse where he asks for Swastyastu Vishwasya Kalap Prasidatam Dhyayantu Bhutani Shivam Mito Diya Manascha Badram Bhajatad Adokshaje Aveshyatam no Matirapi Ahaituki. So he is also asking for, let my mind Naha Matihi Ahaituki Aveshyadam Adokshaje. May my mind be attached to Ahaituki Bhakti towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead, like that. So in this way, there are many other places in Bhagavatam and other literatures. If we search other literatures, we may get many such proofs also, that whenever Bhakti is described, the word Ahaituki is used. So, if you see the meaning of the word Ahaituki, it has two prominent meanings. Ahaituki means causeless, there is no cause. But another way in which the word Ahaituki is used is self-causative. Self-causative means it has no other cause other than its own self. Which means you can say Bhakti is Ahaituki if Bhakti has no cause. Or you can also say that Bhakti is Ahaituki if it has no other cause than itself. Which means if Bhakti causes Bhakti, then that Bhakti can still be considered as Ahaituki. So these are the two prominent ways in which the word Ahaituki is used. Now, the second word that we need to explore is the word Yadrichaya. So, this is also a very popular word. Even in Bhagavad Gita, it comes Yadricha Labha Santushto Dvandvatito Vimatsaraha, like that. So, what is the meaning of this word Yadrichaya? And if you see, even in Bhagavatam, whenever the speaker is describing about how one receives bhakti, he uses the word Yadrichaya. So here is an example from Uddhava Gita, 11th canto. Asmin loke vartamanaha swadharmasto anagas shuchi jnanam vishuddham apnoti mad bhaktim va yadrichaya. So he says, one who is situated in his prescribed duty, free from the sinful activities and cleansed of material contamination, asmin loke vartamana, in this very life, jnanam vishuddham apnoti, if his heart becomes purified, he may get jnana, vishuddham jnanam, transcendental knowledge, or mad bhaktim va yadrichaya, or by good fortune he may attain bhakti unto me. So he uses the word yadrichaya to indicate how one receives bhakti here. Another verse from the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where the word yadrichayopas srita, how after obtaining the mercy of devotee, one receives devotional service, like that it is mentioned. And another verse from the 10th canto, 3rd chapter, the Garbhastuti prayers by the demigods to Krishna, who is situated within the womb of Mother Devaki. They say, Martyo mrityo vyalabhita palayan lokan sarvan nirbhayam nadya gachat tvatpadabjam prapya yadrichayadya sustaha shete mrityurasmadapaiti. So he says that mrityu vyalabhita martyah nirbhayam nadya gachat. People of this material world, no one in this material world has become free from birth, death, old age and disease. Even though fleeing from one planet to another planet. Abrahma bhavanal loka punaravartino Arjuna, Krishna says. But they have not overcome this fear of birth, death, old age and disease. Even Brahma is afraid of death. Mrityudasmad apaiti. But interestingly, that death personified is running in fear from you. Tvat padabjam prapya. But though those living entities who have taken shelter of your lotus feet, how? Yadrichaya. Again here the word yadrichaya is used. So such living entities, sustaha shete, they are sleeping in full mental peace. So in this way, again the word yadrichaya is used to indicate people taking shelter of Krishna or people accepting this path of bhakti. Another famous verse from the 11th canto, teachings of Krishna to Uddhava in Uddhava Gita. Yadrichaya mat katadau jata shraddhostu yah puman nanirvinno nati sakto bhakti yogosya siddhida. So Krishna says, who can achieve perfection in bhakti? Yadrichaya, somehow or other by good fortune, mat katadau jata shraddha. If he has developed faith in hearing my glories, chanting my glories, worshipping my deity form, nanirvinno nati sakto, neither too disgusted with this material world, nor very much eager to enjoy this material world, bhakti yogo asya siddhida. He can attain perfection in the path of bhakti. So again the word yadrichaya is very prominently used. So anyway, so we have to understand the meaning of the word yadrichaya. So yadrichaya has two prominent meanings. Yadrichaya means by chance. Yadricha labha santushto, whatever comes on its own accord, by chance or by luck. Okay. And the second meaning of yadrichaya is yad ichaya, by someone's independent will. So now let's try to explore these two meanings little more deeply. By luck means one can say, oh, luck born out of one's material piety. Which means basically what he means as luck is actually punya. So one gets bhakti by punya. That is one understanding. The second understanding is luck means luck. There is no reason for luck. Causeless luck. That's how one gets bhakti. So if you take the meaning of yadrichaya to mean causeless luck, then one gets bhakti without any reason. Then if you take the second meaning, yad ichaya, by independent will, then the question arises, by whose independent will does one get bhakti? There are three choices. One is the independent will of Krishna. Why this person has bhakti? Because Krishna desired that he have bhakti. The second understanding is independent will of the devotee who is distributing bhakti. This is the second meaning. The third meaning is independent will of the person who is receiving that bhakti. So it could be one of the three things. So in this way there are 5 meanings of the word yadrichaya. We will explore all the 5 meanings. And 2 meanings of the word ahaituki, causeless and self-causative. So we will explore those 2 meanings and then try to explain based on these understandings. If we can explain, why is it that some people receive bhakti and some people don't? So if you can account for all these possibilities, then you have a reasonable answer explaining how does one get bhakti and why do some people don't get bhakti. So that's what we will try to explore now in the next 40 minutes or 45 minutes or so that we have to complete this session. First option, let's consider the point that one receives bhakti by luck. Luck means luck generated by piety. So you may say, oh, why is it that this person has bhakti? Yadrichaya, by chance, by luck. Oh, why is he lucky and why is this person not lucky? Oh, this person seems to be very pious. This person very impious. So therefore, he has some luck which is generated by his piety, and because of that luck he is getting bhakti. So now, if you try to accept this explanation. This explanation is actually contrary to scriptures. This explanation is contrary to pratyaksha praman also, to observation also. If you observe, this is not true. If you see, if you say that this one person gets bhakti because he is lucky due to having some piety, then piety becomes the cause of bhakti. If piety becomes the cause of bhakti, then it is not ahaituki. Because ahaituki means it has to be self-causative or causeless. So it is not causeless because piety is causing bhakti. And it is not self-causative because piety is not equal to bhakti. Therefore, that condition is not fulfilled. And even if you see other statements from the scriptures, like for example this statement, Kirata honandra pulinda pulkasha abira shumba yavanaha kasadayah yenyecha papa yadapa shraya shrayah shuddyanti tasmai prabhavishnave namaha. This famous verse from Bhagavatam which says, however fallen a person may be, Kirata, Huna, Andhra, Pulinda, Pulkasha, Abira, Shumba, Yavanaha, Kasadaya, all these are very fallen, degraded people. Very sinful by nature. But ye anyecha papa and other kinds of sinful people who may not have been listed here. Yad apashraya ashraya. If only they take shelter of a devotee who has taken shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna, shuddyanti tasmai. They can become purified and they can achieve perfection. So therefore, if you say pious people will become devotees, Bhagavatam does not agree. And also, Bhagavad Gita does not agree. Apichet suduracharo bhajate mam ananyabhak sadureva samantavya samyak vyavasito hi saha. Bhagavad Gita says, apichet suduracharo. Even if one may be the most sinful person, he may be addicted to violence, he may be addicted to thievery, he may be addicted to adultery, the most heinous type of sins that one can imagine committing, he says, if he worships me, bhajate mam, ananyabhak, with no other desire other than the desire to please me, he says. So, which sadhureva samantavya, Krishna says that one should consider that person to be a sadhu. So, which means through this verse, Krishna is actually indicating that it is possible for an extremely sinful person to worship him through bhakti. So, which means bhakti is not dependent on piety. Rather, Krishna says in the very next verse of that Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter, Kshipram bhavati dharmatma shashvat shantim nigacchati kaunteya pratijanehi name bhakta pranashyati. In fact, Arjuna, I will take personal responsibility of making that person into a dharmatma. Even though currently there are many sinful inclinations, many sinful traits that you may see in that person, but I will take personal responsibility of making him into dharmatma. Ananyas chintayanto mam yajana paryupasate tesham nityabhiyuktanam yogakshemam vahamyaham. Krishna says, I will take personal responsibility of delivering what he lacks and preserving what he has. So therefore, you cannot say that piety is a prerequisite for bhakti. It first of all, it does not satisfy the ahaituki condition, and it does not satisfy the other scriptural statements which indicates that sinful people actually can practice bhakti. The very next verse again he says, Mam hi partha vyapashritya episyu papayonaya striyo vaishyas tata shudras tepiyanti paramgatim. Whatever may be the sinful birth of that person, Arjuna, please be convinced that such a person can practice bhakti and achieve perfection. So therefore, one should not say that bhakti is caused by piety. So that is not a very reasonable proposal. And this is contrary to practical observation also. When Prabhupada went to the United States, the most sinful of all people, the hippies who are addicted to all the four vices, they were coming and joining Prabhupada. But when Prabhupada was in India, many of the so-called pious people never accepted the teachings of Prabhupada, never accepted Prabhupada as his guru. So therefore, this is contrary to our own history also, and it is contrary to our own personal, whoever has had even limited preaching experience, you know this. Sometimes people struggling with the most troublesome vices. I have personally had experience of people with homosexual tendencies, people with lusty desires, people with severe drinking habits. All such people have developed attraction to practice bhakti. But some of the most pious people, most gentlemanly people, are some of the most stubborn people I have seen in my life, never taking up to bhakti. So therefore, it is contrary to common perception also. Anyone who has had even a limited experience of preaching can vouch for it, that piety is not a prerequisite for bhakti. So therefore, the first option, the first explanation, that first explanation of ahaituki or yadrichaya, which means caused by luck, caused due to piety, cannot be a reason for someone taking up to bhakti. So what about the second option? One receives bhakti by causeless luck. So you may say, why this person has taken up to bhakti and why this person has not taken up to bhakti? Oh, he is lucky, he is not. Why he is lucky, why he is not lucky? You may say, hey, you never question the reason behind luck or the cause of luck. Luck is always causeless. You cannot trace out any cause. So therefore, he has received bhakti because he is causelessly lucky, and he has not received because he is causelessly unlucky. If you say this is the reason, then this is a very strange reasoning, because then you can say that, okay, ahaituki reason is fulfilled, that causeless nature. Ahaituki means causeless. So here there is no reasonable cause for his one person taking up to bhakti. And yadrichaya also, by luck, by chance, that also you see. But then in practical observation, you see those people who have come in touch with devotees, they have taken up to bhakti. And also, if causeless luck would have been the cause of someone taking up to bhakti, Krishna would never glorify preaching. The scriptures would never glorify preaching. Whereas scriptures are filled with quotes glorifying those people who have sacrificed their life for preaching. If you take Bhagavad Gita, Yaidam paramam guhyam mad bhakteshu abhidasyati bhaktim mayi param kritva mamevaishyati asamshayah, Krishna says. Yaidam paramam guhyam, one who teaches this supreme secret, abhidasyati, he gives mad bhakteshu, to my devotees, mayi param bhaktim kritva, he attains prema bhakti, mamevaishyati, and he attains me, asamshaya, there is no doubt about it. And in the next verse he says, Nacha tasman manushyeshu kaschin me priyakrittama bhavita nacha me tasmad anyah priyataro bhuvi. Krishna says, oh Arjuna, in this world there is no one who is more dear to me than that person who has taken up the responsibility of preaching this message of mine. Because this is the way by which other living entities can come closer to Krishna's lotus feet. So if you say causeless luck is the cause for someone taking up to devotional service, then whether you preach or not, he will take up to it if he has causeless luck. And if someone does not have costless luck, then what is the use of your preaching? Anyway, he will not take because he does not have that costless luck. So, costless luck cannot be a reason for someone taking up to bhakti, because in that case there is no meaning for Krishna to glorify preaching. And again in Bhagavatam you see this famous gopis themselves express their gratitude and appreciate that person who has taken up to preaching the message of Krishna. Tava katamritam tapta jivanam kavibiriditam kalmashapaham shravana mangalam shrimadatatam bhuvignanti ye burida jana. So the gopis say, Tava katamritam, the nectar of your name, the nectar of your qualities, the nectar of your pastimes. Tapta jivanam, they are the life and soul of anyone who is suffering the threefold miseries in this material world. Adhyatmik, adibhautik, adidaivik tapas. Whoever is suffering, for those suffering souls, the only solution is your name, form, quality, descriptions of your name, form, qualities and pastimes. Kavibir iditam. And these name, form, qualities, pastimes are glorified by the most brilliant sages who have graced this planet Earth. Kalmasha apaham, they have the potency to eradicate all the sinful inclinations and all the anarthas within the heart of the practitioners. Shravana mangalam, and they bestow all good fortune, all good qualities to those who hear this subject matter. Therefore, Shrimadatatam, the narrations are broadcast all over the world and are filled with spiritual power, Prabhupada writes. Bhuvi grinanti ye burida jana, and those people who have committed their lives for spreading this message of Krishna, they are the most munificent, and we express our gratitude to such people. So the gopis are glorifying the people who spread the message of the Supreme Lord, which means that is what would sow the seed of devotion in the hearts of people. So therefore you cannot say that the cause of bhakti is costless luck, then such feeling prayers offered to, feeling appreciation offered by the gopis to those who spread the message of Krishna would all become false. So therefore you cannot say that costless luck, someone costlessly without is costlessly lucky and therefore he receives the seed of devotion. That also cannot be true. Now let's discuss the third option. The third option is by one's independent will. By whose independent will? Let's take Krishna's independent will. Okay. So why someone gets bhakti, why someone does not get bhakti? Oh, Krishna's mercy. Krishna desired that this person should get bhakti, so he got it. And Krishna desired that this person should not get bhakti, so he did not get. Okay. So is the ahaituki condition fulfilled? Let's try to the ahaituki condition little later. But first thing, does it fulfill the shastric explanation of Krishna's disposition? Krishna says, Samoham sarva bhuteshu name dveshyosti na priyaha ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya mayite teshu chapyaham. Krishna says, oh Arjuna, I am equal to everyone. I don't specially favor anyone, and I don't have any specific hatred towards anyone. Krishna says. So if you say that Krishna shows some specific favor to some living entities and gives them bhakti, but allows the other living entities to suffer, then that would make Krishna partial. But by Krishna's own admission, Krishna says, I am not partial. Samoham sarva bhuteshu. So if two people do not have bhakti, I will not favor one person by giving one bhakti and the other person no bhakti. That will not happen. But if one has already taken up to bhakti and is worshipping me, and he is lovingly trying to reciprocate with me, then I will also try to lovingly reciprocate with him, and that is not partiality. That is just my reciprocal nature. Ye yatamam prapadyante tam stateva bhajamyaham. If you want to reciprocate with me in a particular way, I will reciprocate with you in an appropriate way. So this is my reciprocity. This is not just my partiality. And even if you may accuse me of being partial to my devotee, I don't mind. Like you may have a most benevolent well-wisher, a person with a wonderful charitable disposition. He may be distributing lakhs and lakhs of rupees in charity. But even such a person, if he gives little more money to his own son as inheritance, will anyone criticize him for being partial? It is natural for a father to be, however charitably disposed that father may be, it is natural that that father will be little more charitably disposed towards his own son. So if even in the material world, ordinary people would not be criticized, why should Krishna be criticized? In Krishna, this preferable treatment of Krishna towards his devotees is an ornament, because the devotees have willingly given up all other shelter and have completely surrendered to Krishna. So therefore one cannot criticize Krishna for being favorably disposed towards the devotees, because they have given up all other shelter. Sarvadharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam raja. Hearing that clarion call of Krishna, they have given up everything and come to the lotus feet of Krishna for shelter. Why would Krishna forsake them? He will never forsake them. So therefore, one cannot criticize Krishna for being favorably disposed towards the devotees, because they are 100% surrendered to Krishna. So he will naturally extend that shelter towards those who are completely surrendered. But to a common person, Krishna is equal, always. So therefore you cannot say one receives bhakti by the independent will of Krishna, because if you say independent will of Krishna is the cause, then Krishna will be accused of being partial, but this is not true. So therefore, the independent will of Krishna cannot be the reason why one receives bhakti. So now we have to explore the fourth reason. The fourth reason is by the devotee's independent will. Why one receives bhakti? By the independent will of the devotee. Why one does not receive bhakti? Because the independent will of the devotee is not there, or the devotee did not independently will to give bhakti to that person. So if you explain in this way, one immediate problem that arises is that the devotee is partial. So if Krishna can be accused of being partial, why can't the devotee be accused of being partial? Okay. But if you see, Krishna can be accused of being partial. Why? Because Krishna is omnipotent, Krishna is omniscient, and Krishna is omnibenevolent. He loves everyone and he is capable of doing anything to anyone, and he perfectly knows the desire of the living entity within the heart. So now, if Krishna wants to give bhakti to anyone, he is Satya Sankalpa. Just by his desire it can get accomplished. So if Krishna wants to give bhakti to someone, it is immediately accomplished. But a devotee may be omnibenevolent. He may have a very loving disposition towards every living entity in this material world. But a devotee is not omnipotent. He does not have all the power, and he cannot be omnipresent. If he is in India, if he is in a particular village in India, then he can preach only to those villagers. Of course, in today's day of internet, like some of you must be sitting in a different part of the world and watching this presentation. So internet in one sense, apart from the million disadvantages that it has in distracting people of this world, it has some good utility also. So, but having said that, just by internet preaching, you cannot completely take care of a person's spiritual life, some personal dealings. What of those people who cannot speak English? How will they get benefited even though internet is there? So therefore, a devotee is not omnipotent and he is not omnipresent. So therefore, if a devotee is giving bhakti to some person and not giving to someone else, partiality need not be the reason. It could be some practical considerations. A devotee has limited time, a devotee has limited resources, a devotee has limited skill sets, limited money. So with all that, it is but natural that a devotee would try to maximize his outreach. Where can I invest this time, energy, money in such a way that I can reach out to maximum people, or I can create a very deep impact on the people whom I reach? So naturally, like if you ask me, I come from South India, but I stay in Maharashtra, in a village in Maharashtra. It's an Adivasi village. So, where people can't even understand Hindi properly, what to speak of English. And I can't speak any language other than English and my own mother tongue Tamil properly. So, if someone asks me, where would you like to go and preach? I would naturally choose an English speaking audience, and in the worst case, I may choose Tamil speaking audience. But actually, having stayed here for so many years, I would prefer actually Hindi speaking audience to Tamil speaking audience. But I would naturally try to see with my available skill sets, with my available time and with my available energy and ability, I would naturally try to choose a particular class of audience to another class. Does it mean I am partial? So a devotee cannot be accused of being partial that way. But Krishna can, because Krishna is omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, but the devotee is not. So therefore, it is for practical considerations. And that's exactly what Bhagavatam also says. Ishvare tadadineshu balisheshu dvishashtucha prema maitri kripa upeksha yat karoti sa madhyama. So a madhyamadhikari naturally have to see whether a person is inimical, whether a person is favorably disposed, whether a person is already a devotee. So such considerations he has to see, and he will naturally choose to give it to some people and choose not to give it to some other people. So therefore you cannot accuse a devotee of being partial, even if he may choose to give bhakti to someone and choose not to give bhakti to someone else. So therefore we have discussed this. Is the devotee partial then? No, not necessarily. So therefore, why someone gets bhakti? Because of the independent will of the devotee. And why someone does not get bhakti? Because of the independent will of the devotee. Is that a contradiction? No. It is for practical considerations that a devotee chooses to give bhakti to someone and chooses not to give bhakti to someone else. So a devotee cannot be accused of being partial. Now, what about the ahaituki nature of bhakti? So we have to evaluate whether this kind of explanation is in line with the ahaituki nature of bhakti. So ahaituki means either causeless or self-causative. So at the outset, if you see, is bhakti causeless? Is in this explanation, is bhakti causeless? What is the cause of bhakti? Independent will of the devotee. So is independent will of the devotee the same as bhakti? No. So therefore, the ahaituki nature is not satisfied. But this is only from a superficial understanding. We have to explore still further. Why did the devotee get the independent will to share bhakti? The gopis, I will quote that same verse again. Tava katamritam tapta jivanam kavibiriditam kalmashapaham shravana mangalam shrimadatatam bhuvi grinanti ye bhurida jana. So they are sharing this message because they are bhurida, because they are compassionate, because they are munificent. So where did this compassion, munificence, where did this come from? If you trace the root of this compassion and munificence, you will find out it is his practice of bhakti. As Bhagavatam says, Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavatya kinchana sarvair gunais tatra samasate sura harava bhaktasya kuto mahatguna manoratena sati dhavato bahihi. So Bhagavatam says that a devotee's compassion and all the other such good qualities like munificence, they are born out of a devotee's practice of bhakti. So therefore, ultimately it is bhakti in the heart of the devotee that causes bhakti in the heart of the receiver. So bhakti causes bhakti is congruent with the self-causative nature. Ahaituki condition is satisfied actually. So only from a superficial level, the ahaituki condition is not satisfied. If you say that, independent will of the devotee, but beneath the independent will of the devotee is the compassion of the devotee. Beneath the compassion is the devotional practice of the devotee. So it is devotion that is causing devotion. Therefore, the ahaituki self-causative nature of bhakti is satisfied. So therefore, another verse from the Padma Puran says, Yenarchito haristena tarpitani jagantyapi rajyanti jantavas tatra jangamas tavara api. A person practicing bhakti, Yenarchito harihi, one who is worshipping Lord Hari, he is such a person is pleasing to all living entities. And he becomes compassionately disposed to all living entities. So naturally, compassion is a natural byproduct of practice of bhakti. Ishvare prema tadadineshu maitri balisheshu kripa. Seeing, feeling a sense of compassion towards the innocent living entities who are suffering due to lack of devotion towards Krishna, they naturally feel very disturbed and compassionate. And that compassion is a product of bhakti. So therefore, the statement that one receives bhakti by devotee's independent will is not actually incongruent with the ahaituki and yadrichaya nature of bhakti. But then the question arises, is the devotee acting independently of the will of Krishna? So if you say, this is a very tricky question, because till now we thought we had an answer to this question. Oh, it is true, the yadrichaya nature is satisfied, the ahaituki nature is also satisfied, and why someone gets bhakti, why someone does not get bhakti, that is also satisfied. But one very cardinal question, if you say someone gets bhakti due to the independent will of the devotee, then my question is the devotee acting independent of the will of Krishna? If you say yes, then the question is he a devotee? Is he a devotee at all? And if you say no, a devotee would never act independent of the will of Krishna, then ultimately it is not devotee's will, it is Krishna's will. Then again the same problem of partiality on the part of Krishna. So then it would mean like only superficially one gets bhakti by the independent will of Krishna, but actually the devotee never has an will which is independent of the will of Krishna. Therefore, ultimately it is Krishna's will only, which means again the problem of partiality will come. So now, if you see, the Shastras explain that, but one should not conclude that since the devotee is dependent on the will of the Lord, the devotee cannot initiate the bestowal of mercy. Krishna has voluntarily surrendered the distribution rights of bhakti to the devotee. The devotee can distribute bhakti. So, yes, it is ultimately Krishna's independent will, but he has voluntarily surrendered that will to the devotee out of his natural affection for the devotee. So therefore, the Lord willingly becomes subservient to his devotee and gives preeminence to his devotee by granting him the power to bestow the Lord's mercy in the form of bhakti. So therefore, one cannot accuse the devotee of acting independent of the will of Krishna, because Krishna has voluntarily surrendered that will to his devotee. So therefore, there is no harm in such statements if we understand their relative nature like that. So then we come to the last theme of today that we will be discussing. We have just 4 minutes left. So I will defer this discussion to tomorrow, because this will be a little elaborate discussion about, if you say that the devotee is distributing bhakti, what does it mean to distribute bhakti? What exactly is he distributing? So we will try to understand the subject matter tomorrow in detail. But before I pause for the day, I just want to remind you. But before reminding you, I would like to thank you, express my gratitude that you took your valuable time out and patiently heard this discussion that is being presented in this book. So what I would suggest is, if hopefully you would have taken some notes and you would have written down some questions of some subject matter which was not clear, I would suggest you can go to the chat box right now and type whatever questions you may have, and as far as possible I will try to address these questions tomorrow morning just before starting the day's discussion. So thank you very much for your patient listening. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Hare Krishna.